Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, stands as perhaps the most systematically ruthless figure in the Nazi hierarchy. While not a traditional military general, his control over the Waffen-SS Gestapo and the entire SS apparatus made him the primary architect of Nazi Germany's most heinous crimes. Born in 1900 to a middle-class Bavarian family, Himmler's transformation into the chief orchestrator of genocide illustrates how ideological fanaticism can corrupt seemingly ordinary individuals. His meticulous, bureaucratic approach to mass murder was perhaps more chilling than overt sadism. He turned genocide into an administrative process. Himmler's empire encompassed concentration camps, extermination facilities, and a vast network of security forces. He personally oversaw the development of the final solution, transforming Hitler's anti-Semitic rhetoric into operational reality. His speeches to SS officers reveal a man who saw himself as a guardian of racial purity, willing to commit any atrocity for what he believed was the greater good of the German people. The Reichsführer SS established a system where mass murder became routine work. Camp commandants reported to him directly, and he regularly visited facilities to ensure efficiency. His infamous Posen speeches in 1943 acknowledged the horror of their actions while demanding absolute commitment. We have the moral right. We had the duty to our people to do it, to kill this people who wanted to kill us. Himmler's ruthlessness extended beyond the Holocaust. He commanded Einsatzgruppen death squads in Eastern Europe, oversaw brutal anti-partisan operations, and implemented policies of systematic starvation and slave labor. His vision of German settlement in the East required the elimination or enslavement of entire populations, a plan he pursued with chilling determination until Germany's defeat. SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich earned his nickname, the Butcher of Prague, through his ruthless suppression of Czech resistance and his central role in planning the Holocaust. Tall, blonde, and athletic, Heydrich embodied the Nazi racial ideal while simultaneously orchestrating its most murderous policies. Heydrich's career trajectory illustrates how ambition and ideological commitment could propel individuals to unprecedented levels of brutality. Initially a naval officer dismissed for misconduct, he found his calling in the SS, where his intelligence and ruthless efficiency quickly elevated him to become Himmler's most trusted deputy. As head of the Reich Security Main Office, RSHA, Heydrich controlled the Gestapo, criminal police, and SD intelligence service. This consolidation of power made him one of the most dangerous men in Nazi Germany. His administrative efficiency in organizing persecution was matched by his personal involvement in violent operations. The Wannsee Conference of January 20th, 1942, represented the pinnacle of Heydrich's administrative approach to genocide. Chairing this meeting of senior Nazi officials, he presented detailed plans for the systematic murder of European Jewry. The clinical language of the protocols, discussing evacuation and final solution, masked the reality of industrial-scale killing that Heydrich was organizing. In Czechoslovakia, Heydrich implemented a reign of terror that combined calculated brutality with propaganda. He executed hundreds of Czech intellectuals and resistance members, while simultaneously improving worker conditions to win popular support. This dual approach, terror combined with pragmatic concessions, demonstrated his sophisticated understanding of occupation policies. Heydrich's assassination by Czech resistance fighters in May 1942 triggered massive retaliation, including the complete destruction of Lidice village and the murder of its male population. Even in death, Heydrich's policies continued to generate atrocities, illustrating how his ruthless methods had become institutionalized within the Nazi system. SS Obergruppenführer Erich von Bach-Zelewski specialized in the Nazi regime's most brutal aspect of Eastern warfare, anti-partisan operations that systematically targeted civilian populations. His approach to security operations demonstrated how military necessity could be used to justify genocide. Bach-Zelewski's background as both an SS officer and a military commander gave him unique authority in occupied territories. He understood that Nazi goals in Eastern Europe required not just military conquest, but the elimination of entire populations deemed racially or politically undesirable. His anti-partisan campaigns in Belarus and Poland were characterized by extreme brutality towards civilians. Operating under the principle that partisan activity required collective punishment, Bach-Zelewski's forces routinely burned villages, executed male populations, and deported survivors to concentration camps. These operations were genocidal in both intent and effect. The Warsaw Uprising of 1944 provided Bach-Zelewski with his most notorious assignment. Tasked with suppressing the Polish resistance, he deployed some of the most brutal units in the German military, including the Dirlewanger Brigade and Kamiński Brigade, composed largely of convicted criminals and collaborators from other occupied territories. Bach-Zelewski's approach to Warsaw was systematically destructive. Rather than seeking a quick military solution, he implemented a deliberate policy of civilian massacre, designed to break Polish resistance permanently. His forces murdered approximately 200,000 civilians during the uprising, many in planned massacres unrelated to military operations. What distinguished Bach-Zelewski was his ability to present extreme brutality as a military necessity. His reports consistently portrayed civilian massacres as essential security measures, demonstrating how Nazi ideology could transform war crimes into bureaucratic procedures. His survival after the war and eventual testimony against other Nazi leaders revealed the complex loyalties within the SS hierarchy. SS Oberführer Oskar Dirlewanger commanded the most notorious unit in the German military, the 36th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, better known as the Dirlewanger Brigade. This unit, composed primarily of convicted criminals and military prisoners, became synonymous with unprecedented sadism and brutality. Dirlewanger's personal history of criminal behavior, including charges of sexual assault and theft, made him an unlikely military commander. However, his complete lack of moral restraint made him valuable to Nazi leaders seeking maximum brutality in anti-partisan operations. His unit served as an outlet for the regime's most sadistic impulses. The Dirlewanger Brigade's composition reflected Nazi willingness to employ any means necessary in pursuit of their goals. Convicted murderers, rapists, and thieves were offered the choice between continued imprisonment and military service under Dirlewanger. This created a unit where atrocities were not aberrations, but standard operating procedure. Operating primarily in occupied Poland and Belarus, the brigade engaged in systematic torture, rape, and murder of civilians. Dirlewanger personally participated in and encouraged these atrocities, viewing them as both military tactics and personal entertainment. His unit's reputation for brutality was so extreme that even other SS units avoided association with them. During the Warsaw Uprising, Dirlewanger's forces committed some of the war's most horrific atrocities. They systematically murdered patients in hospitals, burned civilians alive, and engaged in mass rape and torture. These actions served no military purpose, but reflected Dirlewanger's belief that terror could be an end in itself. Dirlewanger's sadism extended beyond battlefield operations. He personally tortured prisoners and encouraged his men to compete in inventing new forms of cruelty. This institutionalization of sadism created a unit where the most extreme behavior was rewarded rather than punished. The survival of detailed accounts of Dirlewanger's atrocities provides insight into how individual pathology could be weaponized within the Nazi system. His brigade represented the complete abandonment of military ethics in service of ideological extremism. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, as head of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, holds unique responsibility for transforming the German military into an instrument of war crimes. Unlike purely SS figures, Keitel represented the traditional German officer corps' capitulation to Nazi criminal policies. Keitel's background as a professional officer made his role particularly significant. His willingness to sign criminal orders gave these policies the legitimacy of traditional military authority. This transformation of the Wehrmacht from a professional army into an instrument of genocide represents one of Nazism's most significant institutional victories. The Commissar Order, signed by Keitel in June 1941, mandated the execution of captured Soviet political officers, directly violating international law. This order institutionalized murder within military operations and established precedent for subsequent criminal directives. Keitel's signature made clear that atrocities were official military policy, not unauthorized actions. Keitel also approved the Barbarossa Decree, which suspended military justice for crimes committed by German soldiers against Soviet civilians. This order essentially gave Wehrmacht personnel license to commit atrocities without legal consequences. The decree represented a fundamental transformation of military law to serve ideological goals. His approval of collective reprisal policies resulted in countless civilian deaths throughout occupied Europe. Under Keitel's directives, German forces routinely executed dozens of civilians in response to partisan attacks. These policies transformed routine military operations into instruments of terror against civilian populations. What made Keitel particularly dangerous was his ability to present criminal orders as military necessities. His professional demeanor and traditional military background gave legitimacy to policies that violated every norm of civilized warfare. He demonstrated how established institutions could be corrupted to serve genocidal ends. Keitel's post-war defense that he was merely following orders rang hollow given his position and authority. As head of the Wehrmacht's high command, he possessed both the knowledge and authority to resist criminal policies. His willing participation in war crimes represented a conscious choice rather than compulsion. SS Obergruppenführer Friedrich Jeckeln specialized in the systematic murder of Jewish populations in occupied Soviet territories. As a higher SS and police leader, he commanded Einsatzgruppen units responsible for some of the Holocaust's largest massacres. Jeckeln's approach to mass murder was characterized by ruthless efficiency and innovation in killing methods. He developed techniques for maximizing the speed and scale of executions while minimizing German manpower requirements. His methods became models for subsequent operations throughout occupied Europe. The Rumbula massacre near Riga in November and December 1941 represented Jeckeln's most notorious operation. Under his direction, German forces and Latvian collaborators murdered approximately 25,000 Jews over 2 days. Jeckeln personally supervised the operations, ensuring maximum efficiency in the killing process. Jeckeln's innovation lay in his systematic approach to mass execution. He developed detailed procedures for selecting killing sites, organizing victim transport, and disposing of bodies. These methods were documented and distributed to other commanders, spreading his techniques throughout the Nazi killing apparatus. His operations in Ukraine resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths. Jeckeln commanded units responsible for massacres at Babi Yar, where over 33,000 Jews were murdered in 2 days. His ability to organize killing operations on this scale demonstrated how modern administrative techniques could be applied to genocide. What distinguished Jeckeln was his combination of bureaucratic efficiency with personal involvement in violence. Unlike some Nazi leaders who maintained distance from actual killing, Jeckeln regularly visited execution sites and participated directly in operations. This hands-on approach ensured maximum effectiveness in his murderous campaigns. Jeckeln's post-war execution by Soviet forces provided some measure of justice, but his techniques and organizational methods had already been adopted throughout the Nazi system. His legacy lies in demonstrating how systematic approaches could transform sporadic violence into industrial-scale genocide. SS Oberstgruppenführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich represented the transformation of Hitler's personal bodyguard into a major military force. His career illustrates how personal loyalty to Nazi leadership could override traditional military ethics and legal constraints. Dietrich's background as a working-class Nazi Party loyalist distinguished him from traditional Prussian officers. His unwavering devotion to Hitler and Nazi ideology made him a reliable instrument for policies that professional officers might question. This personal loyalty translated into command of increasingly important military units. As commander of the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Dietrich led one of Nazi Germany's most elite military formations. This unit's evolution from ceremonial guard to frontline combat force reflected the militarization of Nazi ideology. Under Dietrich's leadership, the Leibstandarte became synonymous with both military effectiveness and criminal behavior. The Malmedy massacre during the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 exemplified the criminal culture Dietrich fostered within his command. Troops under his authority executed 84 American prisoners of war in violation of international law. This atrocity reflected the normalization of war crimes within SS military units. Dietrich's leadership style emphasized aggressive tactics and minimal concern for legal constraints. He regularly encouraged his troops to show no mercy to enemies, particularly those deemed racially or politically inferior. This approach created a command climate where atrocities were expected rather than prevented. His unit's participation in Operation Barbarossa included systematic execution of Soviet prisoners and civilians. Dietrich's forces implemented the criminal orders issued by higher command with particular enthusiasm, viewing them as expressions of Nazi ideological commitment rather than violations of military law. The loyalty Dietrich inspired among his troops was based on shared commitment to Nazi ideology rather than traditional military professionalism. This created units that were both militarily effective and consistently criminal in their treatment of enemies and civilians. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein presents the most complex case among these figures. Widely regarded as Nazi Germany's most brilliant military strategist, his inclusion reflects the moral compromises made by traditional German officers in service of a criminal regime. Manstein's military genius was undeniable. His strategies enabled German victories in France and the initial success of Operation Barbarossa. However, his brilliance makes his complicity in war crimes more troubling rather than less. He possessed the intelligence to understand the criminal nature of the Nazi policies. Unlike purely ideological figures like Himmler or Heydrich, Manstein represented the Prussian military tradition's accommodation with Nazism. His willingness to implement criminal orders demonstrated how professional military culture could be corrupted by totalitarian ideology. In the Soviet Union, Manstein's Army Group South implemented starvation policies against Leningrad and executed commissar orders against captured Soviet officers. While he later claimed to have opposed these policies, evidence suggests his compliance was willing rather than reluctant. Manstein's treatment of civilian populations in occupied territories reflected acceptance of Nazi racial ideology. His forces participated in anti-partisan operations that deliberately targeted civilians and collaborated with Einsatzgruppen murder operations. These actions went beyond military necessity to serve genocidal goals. The Field Marshal's post-war defense emphasized his role as a professional soldier following orders. However, his position and authority gave him opportunities to resist criminal policies that he chose not to exercise. His silence in the face of atrocities represented moral cowardice disguised as military duty. Manstein's case illustrates how individual brilliance can serve evil purposes when divorced from moral courage. His strategic genius enabled Nazi aggression, while his moral passivity facilitated genocide. This combination of talent and cowardice makes his legacy particularly troubling. These 8 figures represent different aspects of Nazi ruthlessness, from ideological fanaticism to professional accommodation with criminal policies. Their combined actions resulted in millions of deaths and immeasurable human suffering. Understanding their methods and motivations provides crucial insights into how civilized societies can descend into barbarism. The varying backgrounds of these figures, from working-class loyalists like Dietrich to aristocratic officers like Manstein, demonstrates that ruthlessness was not confined to any single social class or background. Nazi ideology provided a framework that could corrupt individuals across the social spectrum. Who do you think was the most ruthless? Let me know in the comments below.